But okay, when you see some of the jokes and some of the jokes that like cross a line, do you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have wrote that, or I would never write some things like this when they were talking about, um, let's say, suicide or some religion, which is highly, highly controversial? Okay, so hello everyone. We are here again with the spectacular Mr. Scott, and we're just going to continue about the last podcast that we discussed about more about the preschool writing and writing in general and what should we do and what were his suggestions about what you should do as a beginner writer and if you're looking for make a career in writing. So right now, one of my first question is, okay, so it is, if even if it is the same medium as animation, but the cartoons shows, the adult cartoon shows like Rick and Morty, Family Guy, and South Park, they are known for being writing something very, very highly controversial things and still get away with this. So if you were there, if you have to write for the same thing again, what would be your approach, or which would it will be a culture shock on in some sense?
If I had to write for one of those shows, you're
Yeah.
saying? Instead of like preschool?
Yeah.
Um, well, yeah, it's just a different sensibility. I have written adult animated stuff. I have some pilots I've written that are Simpsons-esque and like Family Guy-esque. So I'd like to think I can write for a wide genre of styles. And I had some sitcoms back in the day that won Scriptapalooza. So it's just a different muscle, It's like, and I think I talked last time in part one. We're in the sequel now. Hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully the sequel lives up to the original. Um, I talked about shoot, I lost my train of thought. How I think preschool writing is actually the most difficult writing there is in television because you're limited by so many things.
Yeah.
By language, by again, like you can't have a character eat a grape, so it's very strict. Whereas primetime stuff and Simpsons, like, and Family Guy, you can do anything. You can bring in aliens, you can cut to other scenes that don't really relate, you can do all kinds of fun asides, you can talk to the camera. So yeah, I find those kinds of shows actually freeing to some degree, like, and not, it's not easy to come up with a great script still or great jokes, but you're certainly way less limited than you are in preschool TV. So I enjoy that, and it feels freer and to some degree easier to me on some level. So yeah.
Okay. But okay, when you see some of the jokes and some of the jokes that like cross a line, do you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have wrote that, or I would never write some things like this when they were talking about, um, let's say, suicide or some religion, which is highly, highly controversial?
Right. I mean, for that audience, for an older audience, I think it's fine, honestly. And I'm one of those guys. I come from like a sketch comedy background. I've done stand up a handful of times, so I don't think, comedy necessarily has to be limited. You don't want to hurt anybody, or, there are some lines, I'm sure, but like comedy for the most part, the whole point of it is to have strong opinions and to say strong things and to, so for older audiences, I rarely am offended by anything, honestly. But for younger kids, and even Disney and Pixar are guilty of this sometimes. And I don't like this. They will throw in like sexual innuendos. Like there's a part in one of the Cars movies where Mater is saying he likes to get lit or something like that, and he's talking about his light, but obviously it's also a joke for like him drinking, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm a prude, I guess, in that sense, because I hate that in animated features that are geared more for younger kids. I just think it's unnecessary, and I think the best animated features don't need to resort to that type of comedy. There's other comedy you can do for adults that isn't about sex or alcohol, or and none of that stuff is bad, but like I don't think it has a place in a feature film like that. I mean, it just takes me right out of it, honestly. Also, it just it loses the coherence of the world that they've established because I'm like, oh, there's a joke for the adults that will go over all these kids' heads and just makes me wonder why it was in there. So in that sense, I don't like it. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, but okay, so that limits the writer in such a way, as you said already. But I don't. Okay, because if I'm reminiscing about the last time, you said you guys did throw in some adult jokes in Rugrats as well. So what's the point? You're just having fun with the scripts, and it goes through all of the checks between you and the producer and the editor and everything. So I don't know the reason for it. I seriously don't know. If you know, please educate me on that.
Yeah, well, Rugrats was different again too, because it wasn't just for kids. It was written for kids and adults from the start, really. Like, and we always did two levels because the adults had their very adult stories that were about things kids don't even care about, like business takeovers. Like Angelica's mom, Charlotte, was a businessman, and Tommy's dad was an inventor. So we threw in all kinds of adult level jokes. And I think the only characters that we ever, I don't know if any of, I can't remember specifics, but I do remember. And if you look at some of the old episodes, there's a few like sexual references, very light, but between Grandpa Lou and his wife Lulu, I think we threw that in. And I don't think I personally did it. I can't remember, but like Grandpa for some reason was the one person that we could be like, oh yeah, Grandpa and Lulu. We could have a little bit of playfulness between them. So, and it was never overt, but there were little hints of stuff we put in. So, yeah,
Okay, so just for the fun sakes, right? Just for
yeah.
funsies.
And again, it wasn't anything overt. It wasn't like it was all implied and just in my way, in my mind, we never did anything in a crude way. And again, I can't think of a specific example that I was involved in, but if you look at old episodes of the show or look it up online, people will point out that some of it is a little sexual here and there. So
Yes, there's like tons and tons of videos on YouTube that just says like, okay, we found these adult jokes in Disney movies, or we found these adult jokes in the beloved cartoon shows, and I'm like, okay, I didn't get that when I was a child. But if I think about one thing that was clean through and through was, well, apart from some things in Looney Tunes, there was this, I'm forgetting the guy who was a skunk.
Pepe Le Pew.
Yes, yes, yes. Except him, everything was squeaky clean, and that guy was a little problematic to say the least.
Yeah, he'd be canceled. I mean, Bugs did a lot of drag, and there was a lot of Bugs being seductive, and like, hey, and dressed up in the dress and a lot of this kind of stuff and the big lips. So uh yeah, Pepe Le Pew is the worst, but I think Warner Brothers, they threw in stuff too, there was some sexuality in Warner Brothers. But again, not overt. Like the best example of a movie that I think is just really on a kid level and amazingly entertaining is the Curious George movie. Like I worked on a TV series, so I may be a little biased, but my kids and I watched the movie when they were young before I even worked on Curious George series, I think. And that has no like off-color references for adults. It has not anything suggestive at all. And I think it's a brilliant movie. So yeah. So it can be done, like, and I'm
Okay,
sure there's lots of other movies that do it too, but
so I have to check that out. Oh, speaking of movies, have you seen the Simpsons movie or no?
yeah, I saw it years ago.
Okay, it was amazing. It was one of those movies that kind of didn't stick out and was not boring as the other movies that are based on the show.
Right.
And it got me thinking, like, if you were about to write, for example, or anyone was about to write, like, Rugrats movie, or, for example, something else that you work on, a movie, let's say the Family Guy movie. I don't know how will that work because that has a lot of cutscenes, and the humor is always because of the cutscenes. So, what would be the process if you were to write something like that?
That's a good question. I mean, I can talk about the Rugrats movies that they made. I think you want a bigger idea, to warrant a feature format. So I think the first Rugrats movie, to me, it wasn't as engaging as Rugrats in Paris, the second movie. The first one was kind of like a romp. There was a circus train, I think, and it crashed, and it was fun, but I don't know that the level of story warranted a full feature. I'm a picky writer again, but it was well done. But Rugrats in Paris, I think, is a great example of an idea that needed a feature film because Chucky is finally getting a new mother, so you got this big heartfelt story at the center of it, and that's a huge idea. And B, Stu is finally being recognized for being a great inventor and they're being flown to Paris and to take part in Reptarland Paris, so you get to go to another city. You get the big action sequences with the Reptar that he built. So that to me is the best kind of feature that comes out of the television show. It's motivated by character, deep character stuff. Chucky gets a new mommy, and also big set pieces. You end up with essentially a Godzilla battle at the end of that one. So, and there's a great villain like Coco. I wrote the video game adaptation of Rugrats in Paris, and I wrote the comic book adaptation. So, and I know the people who wrote the movie, but I wasn't involved with the movie. So, but I love that property. So that's what I would say. And a lot of times, sadly, that doesn't happen where a show is just truly super popular and they're like, we need a movie, and then make a movie that's not necessarily warranted, like the story doesn't warrant 90 minutes or 2 hours of time. But I think Rugrats in Paris did it really well because again, the emotional stakes and the giant set pieces. So
Okay, but the question comes in like, okay, there's a two-parter of questions. Like, you have to show the character arc, and in a movie, right? And if something as long running as Simpsons, for example, in Simpsons movie there was an arc between Marge and Homer, right? They were going through some trouble with their marriage, and there was a whole arc of them loving each other again, right? But if I was about to write a Family Guy movie, for example, I don't know what character arc I'm gonna give to Peter or something like that, if you know what I mean. And the same thing goes for any other TV series. Rugrats, I haven't seen the movie, so I cannot say anything. But and same thing goes, same trouble is with the shows, right? When they learn something, kids learn something. So how do you manage that? Or something like, okay, this character arc was not needed at all, but for the sake of the story, we have to do it. So yeah.
like when turning it into a feature again, like a
No,
TV show.
for both cases. Like when you're writing a feature, you have to put a character arc in. And for every episode, do we need a character arc on that thing, or we don't need a character arc on that thing? Because for me, you do. I like the episode where you see a character arc, or sometimes when people just don't work.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's best the episodes with a character arc. Yeah. You kind of start out with a character needing something or wanting something, and then, you know, you find a fun way for them to try to achieve that. And at the end, they either get it or they don't. So I think those are the best episodes. I don't know if that happens in a good portion of episodes, honestly. Like, I think that's what everybody aims for. Again, going back to Rugrats, just because it's a clear example of this, there were episodes we used to call romps, which are essentially the babies go to a car wash, or the babies the babies go to an ice cream parlor, the babies go to a mini golf course. So it's just like fun babies doing silly things in a mini golf course. So and there's not necessarily any character growth or any big arc. Although in Rugrats, we were able to work in misunderstandings sometimes. Like I think I talked about the one I wrote where they go to an aquarium and they think they're in a sinking ship. So sometimes we're able to do that. But there are shows that just kind of do character romps, or not even character romps, just romps where they just do set pieces. And those aren't as memorable. I think they can be fun, but I don't think they're as memorable as the ones that focus on character stuff. And even some of the more recent shows like Adventure Time, I feel like they all have really strong characters, but a lot of those are about quests, within each show. So it's not necessarily a character arc. It's more like a quest or a goal. So I think there's a lot of ways that the episodes can work. the character arcs, episodes with character arcs are the most satisfying ones, I think. So
Yeah, so the follow-up is that when you have a long-running series, you sometimes just run out of character arcs, and you just have to do something repetitive or something like this. I don't know what. I think Simpson is the biggest culprit of this because, God, that series has been running forever. It's just
yeah.
begging to be ended, but there's that, and obviously, and uh, for even if in Looney Tunes, it's like every apart from Bugs Bunny, I think Bugs Bunny is the one who never gets an arc for some reason, or almost no one gets an arc in Looney Tunes, if I remember correctly, right? But it's
Yeah.
still so funny and memorable. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, they're just great characters. I mean, that's the other thing. If you have great characters, you just want to see those characters be themselves and have fun, you know? So, um, yeah, I don't think there was ever any arc in Looney Tunes. Like you kind or there were arcs that never happened, you know, like Elmer Fudd's goal was to essentially kill Bugs, and that never happened.
Yes.
And yeah, and Pepe Le Pew was trying to catch the girl skunk, and that never happened. And Coyote was trying to catch Roadrunner, you know. So it's a bunch of frustrated people, basically.
Yeah. The only thing I can, okay, I don't think that's an arc or something. I just keep remembering this one show where Bugs finds a penguin and he wants it to return it to the North or South Pole or some reason, and he just couldn't. And at the end, he finds out it's from a the penguin is from a circus, and he just like leaves it there and just goes away. That's the only episode I remember. Okay, so we were talking about Looney Tunes, right? So even though there's no character arc in any of the shorts, and one of the most memorable one was the singing toad.
Oh yeah,
Honey, hello, my baby.
yep, yep.
It had no dialogue, but I still remember that one. But
That's what their whole logo is. You know, it's Michigan J Frog, I think is the toad's name, the frog's name. So,
and
yeah,
it was so best, and everyone remembers it so fondly. So I don't know what it was. Do you have any idea? I don't know why.
I think with that one, it's just like the surprise, and they did it so brilliantly. You know, it's like the fun of seeing a frog sing, and it's the frustration, of course, of it shutting up every time the guy tries to show someone. You know, that's funny every time. So he gets more and more pissed off, and then yeah, it's like the frog is taunting him. So, so that's another frustrated character in a Warner Brothers cartoon. Frustration is funny, I think. So,
Yeah, I don't know why, because it's the but they all have like such strong or I don't know, such I don't know how to say it. Like Bugs Bunny is the smartest guy in the room all the time, smart, witty, and everything, but he never picks up a fight. Someone always try to get to him. And the same thing not same thing, but it's completely opposite with Daffy. Like he wants glory, right? He wants to be he wants glory, he wants prestige, but he never gets it.
yeah, he has no skills to get it really. Yeah.
And then what's and I forgot the hunter. I don't know who's the hunter.
Elmer Fudd.
Yeah, and he just wants to hunt, and he never gets to hunt anymore. So I guess I don't know. Maybe it's the characters that makes it memorable. I don't know what it is, but something it is that makes it memorable so much. Because we remember the characters, we never remember any of the whole skit or sketch from first to from the first scene to last scene. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean it's also it's the characters are great, and then on top of that, they have great like comedic scenarios. Like I'm thinking of duck season and rabbit season. You know, like
Oh yeah.
duck season, rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season. And as far as I know, like Warner Brothers kind of if they didn't invent it, they certainly like um championed that the comedic thing where you switch lines, you know, like just like duck season, rabbit season is the one prime example where Bugs starts saying duck season, and you know Daffy's like duck season, you know.
Yes, basically.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like comic bits like that too that are so hilarious still. And I actually wrote that into I wrote a Batwheel script, which is a show on Warner Brothers. That's about Batman's vehicles where they come alive, and it's a cartoon, and it's not quite preschool. It's a little older than that. It's super fun. Like I wrote for the Joker, and the episode I'm talking about is got Harley Quinn in it, and she does that thing with Batman, like, which I stole right from a Warner Brothers cartoon, and she actually says, "I'm gonna Bugs Bunny you," So she says, "Did not," and Batman's like, "Did too," and she's like, "Did not, did too," and then she's like, "Did too," but Batman doesn't fall for it, so he just kind of grunts. He goes, so, but it was fun to like include that in a Warner Brothers show, so and quote the old stuff like that, the classics.
Yeah, but the Looney Tunes is somewhat different and unique because it's more of a sketch comedy with cartoons, right?
Yeah,
And obviously, when they have cartoons, they have a good chunk of range. They can put an alien in, or they can put the weirdest thing, like whenever. The one thing that I remember, like someone's trying to hunt him, and he goes into a lake. So Bugs Bunny goes into a lake, gets on the boat, and rows it back to the next shore. And the guy who was hunting him, he swims to the boat, brings the boat back in, and then rows it back to him again. That was funny too, right?
yep.
It was the short guy with the red mustache. I'm sorry, I'm bad.
Oh, Yosemite Sam.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yosemite Sam. Yeah, I love.
Yeah, it's kind of absurdist too. It's surreal comedy. It's kind of like the stuff like Monty Python did later, where it's just silly, too, and surreal. Yeah,
Oh, I love Monty Python. I don't know
yeah,
which
me
one is
too.
your favorite movie though.
Python movie,
Yeah.
Holy Grail.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
That thing again. I that thing was really funny. Like some of it was just does not make sense at all. Like the knights who say knee. I was like, when we first saw it, I was like, it's so stupid, but it's so funny. And I'm like,
yeah. It's just silly for the sake of silliness, which you gotta love. So, yeah, it's the 50th anniversary of Holy Grail right now. Like it just April 28th, 1975, it opened, and I think it's playing in a couple theaters again now. So,
oh, I must
yeah,
watch it.
Python was a huge influence on me. So,
Yeah, but that makes sense. And most of the comedy in those movies was squeaky clean as well. Most of it.
yeah, I mean, they did some innuendo, but it was never overt or like, never explicitly. It's like I'm thinking of Lancelot in the castle, where he goes into the castle and he comes into the room full of maidens and they're like Lancelot, and he doesn't even know what's going on, which is the funny part. He's like, you know,
Yeah.
what is all this tomfoolery? Yeah. So
Yeah. And apart from the knight who just couldn't take the fact that he's been beaten, like he's been torn apart limbs by limb, and he's still like,
yeah,
no, I can still fight. Yes.
yeah, yep.
That was a bit adult, but the rest of it was kind of that the rest of it was kind of, but it was also a bit of a dark comedy as well because of the witch and burning the witch and all that.
Right. Yeah, it was just silly, like the killer bunny rabbit, and the holy hand grenade, the wizard named Tim. It's just all great silly stuff. So
Yeah, but that movie was a classic for a reason. I didn't know why it was. That's why it made such an impact. And I think the I have heard this from a lot of writers as well. It's hard to write drama. It's hard to write a thriller, but it's the hardest to write a comedy because it's so subjective. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's comedy. You have to have very crisp dialogue and very specific joke you're trying to get across because otherwise it won't play. Like usually jokes have one way they play the best, and that's how it's got to be written and performed. So whereas drama, people can die and say many different things when they're dying, but to get someone to laugh, you got to write it and perform it in a really crisp, funny way for the most part. So yeah, I do think that's true. Yeah, comedy is very particular in a lot of cases. So
Okay. So, okay, how do you know that something is funny? Because sometimes when I write personally, and I feel like, okay, if I'm not just like slapping my leg every time I write a dialogue and I'm not laughing myself while writing it, it's not funny, right? My perceptive is, oh my God, I'm writing such a boring thing ever. But sometimes when someone else reads it and they laugh at all, or sometimes I write the most boring line, but when we shoot, someone just like says it in a different way that makes everyone laugh. I don't know what's the formula for it, and I hope you do, but
Yeah, I'll bring up my comedy writing formula on my phone and show you. It's a very long equation. Yeah.
yeah,
Einstein wouldn't even know what to do with it. No, I have no idea either, honestly. Like
yeah,
that's the weird thing about comedy. Like y- what you want to write is what makes you laugh first, you know? So if it's making you laugh, that's a good start. Like and that's what Chuck Jones did, you know, the guy who did all the Warner Brothers, all the Looney Tunes stuff. They just wrote that stuff for themselves. You know, they were like, we think this is funny, and hopefully other people do. And they had the power to do that, or the lack of supervision back then. Now it's harder and harder to do that, you know? Now there's a lot of levels of notes and let the money people saying change this, and all the rough edges get worn off. But yeah, I think it's, you know, comedy is all that stuff you mentioned, and it's and there's so many different kinds, you know, there's verbal comedy, there's slapstick, there's innuendo, there's just silliness. So and you know, I wrote sketches in college. That's how I kind of started writing regularly. And like you just said, like sometimes you'll hear someone will perform a line in a way that makes it funnier than you thought. You know, it's sometimes a sketch that will read super funny on the page, like it just doesn't play funny for some reason. And I don't know what the answer is, but like you gotta try to make it funny yourself first, like make yourself laugh first. And then hope that people just add to it. Um, yeah, sorry, I think my dog is eating something. It's not supposed to eat. Here. Anyways. Yeah, all right. Sorry.
it's okay. It's completely fine. But has ever happened to you on a show or something like in a way that the performers or the voice actors performed it in such a way or improv something that it just elevated the joke a little bit?
Yeah, every time, honestly, like I'm lucky to work with a lot of great voice actors, and you know, you hear it in your head, and if not elevated, at least like know how you wanted it performed, like because you know, as a writer, honestly, I feel like the goal is to know why every line you have in your script is in your script, why it's written the way it's written, and how it would be performed. Like I know exactly how I want all my lines performed. um, and for the most part, the actors can do it, which is a miracle in itself. You know, you can just put words on a piece of paper and someone will hear what you hear in your head when they read them. So, so yeah, that's great. And the best actors will do that. And they'll not only do that, they'll give you three other ways that you didn't hear it in your head that are also funny or funnier, you know? So that's the great thing about working with an actor. But as a writer, like ideally, you know how your script needs to be performed in your head. You know the quote unquote funniest way that the line should be said. At least I do, and I know other writers who do too. And I knew a writer on a show for Disney. It was a live action show, and she wrote a script with a character that was like a monster. So talk like this, and the executives read the script and didn't get it at all. They like wanted to change the whole thing. I think they even wanted to kill the script. But all of us writers were like, no, we all hear this. This will be really funny. And it was, thankfully. Um, so that's the hard part too, is like, especially when someone empowered doesn't have that talent. It really is kind of a talent to read a script and hear it performed the way the writer wants it performed. I've heard executives admit that they just don't have that talent, you know, and that's why a lot of times to sell a show, you'll have to show someone a sizzle reel. You'll have to put together like a little 1 minute blurb of the show because a lot of people can't read a script and understand like how it's going to play. But for writers, that's all we do, you know, like we see the entire thing playing in our head as we write it. So that took a little, I just understood this about a year ago when I heard an exec say this, like there are some people that just can't do that, and as a writer, that's kind of the natural thing we do, which is, why we're writers, I guess. So
Okay, so when you work with directors, so how closely you work with them, or you just give them the script and like, okay, let's just make this thing for me.
I mean, I've run some animated shows and worked with some great directors, and usually it's very collaborative. They'll be in on the process from premise, from the start of the idea, and they'll chime in with their notes. So usually directors will have notes right away on the idea from premise, and then they'll give notes all the way through to the final draft. So, and a lot of times with directors, it's budget things in animation. It's like we can't have this many characters in this shot. We or I get a lot of times, these two pieces, these locations don't actually link up. If you're saying, Bob goes from, town hall to the park, and they're like, some directors will get very specific about, oh, we can't do that because the skate park is between those two. And then you're like,
No.
okay, well, can we just cut then? So a lot of times it's logistical stuff with directors. And the best directors obviously will add jokes. They'll take something and make something funnier and have, a new idea about a character thing even. And I always love that. I think directors are awesome, and a director can make or break an episode, truly. Like,
No.
like first of all, a voice director in animation, needs to get great performances out of the cast, which generally they're already, but a great voice director will read the script and realize the flow to it and the pacing and know how it, again, know how the writer heard it in their head originally. And then, once the voice, and then they do what's called a radio record in animation, or a radio play. And that's, once the script is finished, they record the voices, just like an audio thing only, and then they'll animate to that. So, um, and that's where the director comes in and can. The other thing directors are great at in animation is adding funny stuff in the background, adding like funny poses to the characters that you never thought of, really exaggerated stuff. So little stuff like that just can really make it so much better. So.
So, okay, a follow-up on that. Like, do you talk to the voice director too, or sometimes let's not voice director, voice actors? And does sometimes it happen to you? Like, I've heard it happens with some of the dubbing artists that they say they're playing this character for so long and they just say, okay, my character wouldn't say that, or my character wouldn't do that. Does that ever
Right.
happen or no?
It's happened to me once, I think. It was on Rugrats, and I think it was my early days. And actually, one of the lead actresses on Rugrats very nicely said that she didn't think that one line I'd written was something the character would say. And I was like, please tell me, because you've been doing this for 7 years already, or whatever it was. So she was very cool about it, and I just wrote up a new version of the line, or she pitched something, I don't remember. So yeah, it happens occasionally, but everybody's really collaborative, I feel like, and I defer to the actors, like, who've been doing a hit show for years. So, if I had started out on a show and maybe it was a show I created, I might, if someone said that kind of thing, I might say, well, I hear it differently in this case, but everybody's just trying to make the show better. So that's the good news.
Okay. Also, again, a follow-up again. How do you deal with the director changes on the show that you've been writing for a while?
Like, if there's a different director, or
Yeah, on the same show, or was it in your experiences the same director throughout all this? Because I've heard that they change directors as they go along sometimes.
they do usually, like, back in the day, there used to be 52 episodes of shows on network, and they'd have probably at least 3 directors rotate in and out, if not more. There are some shows where there's one director, and so you don't have to deal with it. But yeah, honestly, on every show I've worked on, I think I've had my favorite director. So it just happens. Like, they're all good, but some are better at action, some are better at adding comedy. It's just like anything. It's like writers too. Some are better at action, some are better at comedy. So you just gotta um understand that and try to fill in the gaps for the different, perspectives, I guess. So.
Okay. Okay, makes sense. Okay, a weird tangent, but how do you deal with writer's block?
Mushrooms. No.
Okay, okay.
No.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'm lucky, knock on wood. I don't think I've ever gotten writer's block. Knock on wood. I have always been the guy that kind of, even from college or high school, I had a ton of ideas. Like when I first pitched Rugrats, I had 40 ideas. So, um, for me, it's more like I will get stuck sometimes. The first act of a show is the hardest, I think, because you're setting everything up. Trying to make sure my dog is behaving. Making sure everything is set up. There's all the exposition about like what's happening in this episode. So first acts are always the hardest. And so sometimes I can get stuck on figuring out the most brief and entertaining way to set up a complicated episode. I wouldn't call it writer's block because I know everything I have to do. I'm just figuring out the best way to do it. So I don't do it so much anymore, but back when I was starting out, I would spend like an hour or two just on like 3 lines sometimes at the start that had to set everything up just to try to make them really entertaining. So that's the trickiest part still, and that'll take the longest is setting up a script. But writer's block, like if anything, it happens at a premise stage, maybe where you're trying to think of new ideas for a show that's been around forever, like The Simpsons. I can't imagine trying to think of a new idea for The Simpsons, but then you just do anything. Like I will read through the Bible several times to try to get the character arc. I will see what other episodes they've done and try to do a similar thing in a different way. I will people say leaf through magazines, and I've done that. Like just look at a picture and be like, oh, a trip to Paris. What if the characters went to Paris or went to a French restaurant or like so that has occasionally given me ideas. Take a walk, take a shower, like that. I think that's the hardest thing to do is to generate ideas for a show that's been around forever. And we hit that place in Rugrats. And that's what I did. And a lot of times you have other writers to bounce stuff off of too, which is good. So
Okay. Sometimes, do you by any chance like take inspiration from real life incidents? I think you have. I'm assuming you did, and some big news or anything, something that is just there for everyone. Like SNL does that a lot. They take news, some of them political, some of them just sports or anything, and they just make a sketch out of it. So, is that a part of your process too sometimes?
yeah, I keep going back to Rugrats. It just becomes the best example. I was writing on Rugrats when I had young kids. So I had my son was born, my first son turned 1 on my first year on Rugrats. So some of it was taken directly from his stuff, like one thing, like I used to go to a lot of baby sales for kids, like the discount sales for the kids shower. And so I had an idea, like if a baby went to a baby sale, something called a baby sale, they'd think that literally they were being sold, So that became a Rugrats episode where the moms take the babies to a baby sale, and the baby's like, they're gonna sell us. So, and actually, there's that episode. We got to write in my son and the showrunner's son. There's characters named after them, and we gave the artist pictures of our kids to base the characters on, which is super cool. So
Oh, I didn't know that.
I,
That was
I
cool.
tell my son that though. My son's in college now, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever." He doesn't care. So
Yeah, of course he doesn't. Okay, but so okay, so you won an Emmy for Rugrats, if I'm not wrong, right?
yeah,
So what is so if you elaborate on that, was it for a particular episode, for the whole season? What was that all about?
yeah. It was for a particular episode, which was 2 episodes because one 30-minute block is 2 episodes. So it was what was it called? It was called Daddy Daycare, I think, and Hello Dilly. I think. But yeah, I know that was the specific episode, and you just got lucky. I mean, I think they take the whole season into consideration. Lucky in the sense that Rugrats had been nominated several times before. I think it won once, maybe like years before. But this was 2003, to date myself. And I think they changed some sort of Emmy rules, or they submitted it in a different category. Like they were trying prime time and they decided to try daytime. Um, but anyway, that was part of it. And yeah, it was really great. It was awesome. The
Okay.
Emmy is right here. So it's right in view
Okay.
on my bad days. Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, just to follow up on that. So what was the category on? So what is the best writers, or obviously it was for dating, but
Yeah, it was outstanding animated children's series, I think. I can look at it right here. Sorry. Outstanding children's animated program. Yes. So
okay, so what was the okay. So it was for an episode, but also given to a series. It's kind of convoluted.
yeah, I guess the people who judge it don't have it doesn't say the specific episode on it, but that we submitted one episode, or I think we were only allowed one because the people who judge it don't have time to watch the whole season, you know? So
Yeah, yeah, of course.
yeah.
But yeah, that's really interesting, and I obviously you won it in 2003, but I congratulate you right now for it. But
Thank you.
so okay, you have a lots of memories about these shows, and was there one show you were one idea that you were like, I really want to make this, even though I don't want to, but I really want to make this one?
Um, as far as like a TV show that like a
Uh,
kid show,
on Rugrats, a pitch that you did, and or on Paw Patrol or any of the other shows that you're like, I wish they just let me do this thing.
sorry, my dog is in my again. He usually doesn't do this. I would have locked him up. That's it. All right.
If you want to knock him, let me know.
Sorry.
You said you have to walk him or what?
No, I would have locked him up. He usually isn't like this. So sorry. Um, yes. I'm trying to think of what that would be. There's episodes like that on every show I write for. I'm like, wow, I wish I thought of that. Um, in Rugrats, I honestly think uh, Rugrats in Paris is just a brilliant idea and a great movie. So um, I wish I would have thought of that. What TV shows do I love? I mean, Bluey is great. Um, it's just so fun. You know, it's based on play. Like the thing with Bluey though is like no networks were actually looking for that kind of stuff. Like no one would have known. No one was telling writers to write that kind of stuff, where parents were involved, and you know, it was all because everybody was like, we want the kids to see the kids, and kids don't relate to parents, and blah blah blah. So, I think that's a great show though, and it would be super fun to write. What else? I mean, the show I think I've told you that I worked on that I was a fan of first. The only animated show really was Curious George, and I just love that show. It's got such a specific narrative voice. Um, that it was a joy to work on. So, um, yeah.
Okay.
You know, I'm gonna have to lock my dog up. I'm sorry. He's back out. Oh, I know he's not.
Okay.
He's there.
We're closing in 8 minutes. If you can, right?
He's good. He's good. Sorry.
No, no, no. It's fine. It's completely fine. Actually, you're a lucky individual who still has to. Okay. I don't want to go on that tangent. Yeah. Okay. Even with your experience right now, I believe you're struggling to get your projects through. And you also told me about your journey in the beginning. And okay, so let's just say if you want to make a project again and you have to make the contacts again all over again, because obviously your background is not live action at all, and you have to pitch a live action. What would be the process, according to you and with your experience?
Like if I wanted to break into another genre.
Yeah, or live action right now.
Live action. Yeah, I've done a few live action things, but for kids. I need a time machine to make me 30 years younger.
Okay.
That would help. No, it's changing so much right now, honestly. Like I think, what what you need to do probably these days is develop it yourself first. Like I think we talked about this a little in part one, Godfather part one. Um, so I'd be trying to make live action shorts, and I do have some ideas for stuff, and I'm talking with a friend about that right now. For a series like thing, but that's how things are happening these days. They start out as shorts on YouTube. Um, again, I know one of the main actresses from Rugrats is funded like 8 shorts, I think it is 3 minutes each of a series she had. I may be wrong, maybe more, but she got like a good amount of money on one of the funding sites and is doing that. So these days, networks and all the decision makers don't want original ideas because they just want something they know has been proven already because they don't want to lose their jobs on a new idea. When their boss says, why did you pick that? They want to be able to say, because it was already a hit, you know? And I get it because it's bad times right now for everyone. So it sucks all around. But yeah, these days to get an original idea made and to get known for writing in a different genre, I feel like you just have to start making it yourself. And if you have a great agent that can help, my agent is great, but he focuses more on kid stuff. So I've always written older things. And he just doesn't have the ties. And I switched agents briefly for a couple years, a guy that had more ties in older stuff and live action, but un I had terrible timing because that's when the industry started to go into a tailspin. So, yeah, an agent can help if you get a really great agent. Again, like if you can hand someone stuff you've already made and be like, this is an example of what I do. And I don't know if I mentioned this in part one, but when I came out of college, I wanted to write for Saturday Night Live. Did I mention this?
No, not really. I just heard that you wanted to do, you pitched some sitcoms, but then you wanted to write for sitcoms and Simpsons and whatnot. But you never told me about Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, because I was doing sketch comedy in college, and David Spade was briefly in my group before me. I never met him, but my point to get back to what we were talking about is that the story will end with me saying like the people on Saturday Night Live had all done stand up or had already written stuff for the Harvard Lampoon at the time. And I called David Spade out of the blue after graduating college, and he answered because he wasn't famous yet. This was when he was struggling. And I talked to David Spade for like 20 minutes. I'm like, I'm in Arizona too. And, can I just come join you on SNL essentially? And what he said was, everybody on SNL was either stand up first or was established as a writer at the Harvard Lampoon, which is where a lot of the really great SNL writers came from. So again, they were already doing it, they were out there doing something already. So a lot of people these days are doing stand up, and filming it and putting it on the various social media outlets. And I think that's the thing to do now.
Okay, so yeah, it is kind of depressing to hear you have to make your whole thing again and not let well, it's freeing in the way too. So if you want to make a sketch and just make a sketch as a template and just give it to the people and they will check on their own, like if it is good, bad, or ugly or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, there's still stories of people with one piece of material that someone loves that gets them into the business. Maybe these days, probably it's more like a short video or a blog, even. I've heard that happening. So the best way to break in is still to have a unique voice and, something you can show someone. And nowadays, more than more, that's becoming more than a script. That still happens with scripts. It's still totally viable to write spec scripts and send them to people. But you want some original ideas too. You don't just want copies of shows, like because they all want to hear your original voice, ideally.
Okay, but even original, as you said already, needs to have a USP that's just sells it right away, right? If that makes sense or something. Because I don't know what's going on right now because everything I see seems like a copy of a copy of a copy. and it just seems like no one wants original content anymore. The only thing I can think of is like the new movies like Sinners or something like that, but the rest is just IP, and the people who are doing new stuff is A24. I'm not sure if you heard about the people of A24. Those are
Yeah,
the people who are making movies, but they make movies
2024.
really, really low budget.
Yeah. I mean, I think they did Everything Everywhere All at Once too, didn't they? Which
Yes, they are the one. Everywhere, all at
great
once. They
great movie, and that got a lot of Oscars. So but yeah, even Sinners is Ryan Coogler, and he did Black Panther. So he had a huge commercial hit beforehand. So and they were kind of like that's why he was able to do that. So yeah, it's a super rough time right now, honestly. Everybody wants existing IP.
Yeah, that's the that's the worst part of all of it. And especially, I think A24 gave a lot of movies with Oscar. I think The Brutalist was theirs,
Yeah,
and I think before that, I'm not sure about which was there before that, but they had
yeah,
hits before that.
they have.
They made like uh, critically acclaimed movies, and most of them was because they had the philosophy of like, we are not gonna interfere with the movie, none whatsoever. Let them do everything, but our budget will be limited. And I guess that's why a lot of actors flock towards them because they get full freedom to do whatever. And I think that's what you told about in the first part, that it should be more like that. That's why the Simpsons go became so famous. It's just almost dying now, but yeah. Yeah, what do you think the next big thing would be? If you want to predict just for funsies.
Sure. Um, we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
Uh, wow, if I can predict.
If you want to.
I don't even think you can. It'll probably come from YouTube at this point, honestly. So yeah, and it'll probably come from a short, homemade type thing that's low budget, and I can tell you that much. I could be wrong, but I don't see studios coming up with huge things right now because they are just repeating stuff, like you said. So yeah, I think it's going to be from someone who's a small creator on YouTube, probably. So even Coco Melon started out like that. So
Yeah. I think it would be just something another IP, but I think it would be something like, for example, Japanese anime. That would be a new thing, live action anime or something like that. Or I think after comic book, there was also a niche medium like before.